Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this virtual session. Today we have speakers from Oklahoma State University, the University of Hartford, and Wake Forest University, sharing how our institutions benefit from using CELUS. We will also hear more from the vendor at the end of the session, and we'll also have time for questions. My name is Juliana Nykolaiszyn, Associate Dean of Library Operations at Oklahoma State, and I was frustrated and I had enough. It was taking our team way too long to gather vendor statistics. Even with built-in tools to harvest counter data, for example, within Alma Analytics or EBSCO's usage consolidation or panorama, I was either going to have our developer build a tool or try and find another solution. In my frustration, I started searching the internet and came across CELUS. I started a free trial, loaded in some SUSHI credentials, and was immediately wowed by the ease of use, look and feel, and super quick way I could generate statistics for reporting agencies in like 2 clicks, or pull up data during meetings. We have not hit the 1-year mark with CELUS yet, but it is making a difference in our workflows at Oklahoma State. And I'm happy to turn it over to Rebecca Silverstein and Gala Lackey to share more with you.
Hi, y'all. I'm Rebecca Silverstein, a digital services librarian at Oklahoma State University. And I want to start by sharing a story. One about how we've refined the way we wrangle, analyze, and apply e-resource data at OSU. But first, a huge thank you to Juliana for purchasing CELUS for our team. This tool has made data wrangling more efficient and consistent, simplifying how we gather and report usage data. And to understand why this matters, let's take a step back. Before CELUS, managing e-resource data was structured and methodical, but time-consuming. Our workflows relied on pulling reports from vendors, compiling usage data, and preparing it for analysis, a process that took a lot of manual effort. For years, OSU has been expanding access to textbooks, shifting from digital to formats, ensuring students have materials that they need. But with every shift, we had to adapt our workflows to make sure that we had the right data to support our decisions. So what changed? How did we move from manual data wrangling to a more efficient and consistent approach with CELUS? Let's look at where we started and how we got there and where we are today. Now that we've set the stage, let's take a look at OSU's textbook acquisitions has evolved from. In 2007, we began purchasing print textbooks for reserve, working with OSU Bookstore to better align purchases with student and faculty access needs. In 2016, it's a little jump, we shifted from e-preferred purchasing policy, prioritizing digital formats to expand access and free up space in the stacks. In 2018, we started acquiring e-textbooks, which meant we needed to assess their impact. And that required wrangling data across multiple platforms to ensure we had the right information to support future acquisitions, but more on that in the next slide. In 2023, we launched a marketing campaign to raise awareness of library-provided e-textbooks, strengthening faculty partnerships, and expanding our student access. And in 2024, OSU adopted CELUS, making it easier to gather and report usage data, reducing manual workloads, and giving a more complete picture of how resources are being used. Now that we've seen how we've gotten there, let's talk about our process looked like before CELUS and why the shift made such an impact. Okay, we've seen the timeline. And I want to recognize again that the time and expertise that went into building our previous workflows, librarians are data stewards. And our team worked hard to ensure that we had accurate, well-structured data for collection, assessment, and reporting. But like any system, there were challenges, and that's where CELUS comes in. Our process was methodical but manual. Every 6 months, we compiled reports from 15 different vendors, carefully wrangling the data, organizing, standardizing, and preparing it for analysis. The data itself was clean and reliable, but formatting it for reporting still required a lot of hands-on work. Another challenge was delayed reporting. Vendors' reports were always at least a month behind, not because of anything we control, but because that's just simply how vendors generate their data. So while our systems work, it required significant manual effort, and we needed a way to streamline how we gathered and synthesized data for acquisitions and decision making. And that's where CELUS comes in. With CELUS, we've eliminated tedious manual work, making it easier to compile a more complete and accessible picture for resource usage and to support collection management, of course. And that's where my colleague Gala Lackey comes in. She's going to share one of our favorite topics, tags. And we're using CELUS for tagging to enhance ebook accessibility and improve our reporting workflows.
Thanks, Rebecca. My name is Gala Lackey. I'm the Acquisitions and E-Resources Manager at Oklahoma State University, and I'm going to show you how I use CELUS to assess the impact of the ebook marketing campaign that we implemented in spring 2023. My favorite tool for this is tags. They're a great tool for building concise reports. For this project, I created a tag class textbooks, then populated it with tags for each semester. To minimize any skewing caused by different numbers of titles or incomplete usage data each semester, I also created the tag core titles and assigned it to titles that are used every year. And here you see a list of titles with all the tags. This particular list is filtered by the tag core title. Next. And once your tags are set up and assigned to titles, it's time to create reports. You can filter for tags or tag classes and select a specific tag class or a specific tag. For the reports that I created, I'm using the metric to counter 5 unique item investigations, filtering for tag class equals textbooks or for tag equals core title. And here is the report set up for the core titles report. Next. And a list of some of the reports that I created for textbooks. Next. And now here is the output of one of those reports. This is the textbook usage by year for all titles that were tagged as textbooks. And after implementing our marketing campaign in spring 2023, it appears that usage increased from about 15,000 requests in 2022 to nearly 40,000 in 2023, and even more in 2024. However, I know that the title cohort for 2022 is smaller than those of subsequent years, and that our data is less complete for 2022. Usage for the core titles, which are used every year, nearly doubled from 2022 to 2023 and increased again in 2024. This more accurately depicts the impact of our marketing campaign, as it nearly matches the figures I previously compiled manually in Excel. In addition to simplifying assessment of our marketing efforts, the tags let us see what's hot in near real time. Here are the most used ebooks for our current fiscal year, and as you can see, the majority are tagged textbooks. And the top ebooks this semester, again, most are tagged textbooks. Next. So what's next for OSU with CELUS? We're working on tagging platforms and titles to evaluate subscriptions for renewals. We hope to correlate student success to availability of course materials from the library. Our OER librarian is interested in tagging OA textbooks. And I'm sure we'll think of many more exciting applications for CELUS going forward. Now, here's Gwen of the University of Hartford to tell you how they're using CELUS at their institution. Thank you.
Thank you, Gala, and thank you, Juliana and Rebecca. And I think you'll notice this common term here, wrangling, which I like quite a lot. So the title of my section is Wrangling Usage Statistics. Okay, next slide. So our why CELUS story is similar to OSU's, with some different people on the search for the solution. The library at UHart is called Harrison, and the folks at Harrison Libraries needed a better way to review e-resources for the collection development review process. and in particular, sadly, a way to help make best decisions in times of budget cuts, which we can probably all kind of connect to, unfortunately. So they started by redefining a position from having a focus on print serial to encompassing print and e-resource work. And then came me, October 2022, the first ever electronic resource coordinator for Harrison Libraries. And when I saw all the spreadsheets and the disparate tracking methodologies, I too reacted as Juliana at OSU had and set out on the search and discovered CELUS by way of an article in the Charleston Advisor by a lovely woman who I had a lovely conversation with, Catherine Swart. And I'll give some more nods to her at the end when I refer to my references. So how does CELUS help us? I'm going to explain this by way of sharing what CELUS looks like at University of Hartford from a dashboard view to detail. What I recognize personally and appreciate CELUS to be from my past experience when I worked for a manufacturing company, how CELUS wrangles data, a little bit about a purple crayon, a quick look at how it can even handle the non-counter data, and a finale. Next slide, please. So here's a screenshot of the CELUS dashboard. So once you load a bunch of credentials and it does its SUSHI thing, it'll give you a dashboard on this just overview of what you've got in there. So looking at this top level dashboard, we can see which resources we need to make sure we don't cut. You can see EBSCO's news wires at the top of the full text searches and ProQuest dissertations and theses, as well as in the lower right-hand corner, it'll tell you the denials, the full text denials, the top getters in that. That could be something where we have an access issue we need to look into, or an opportunity for our collection development folks to look at. Spine and sports medicine, which I hope they'll figure that out soon because I have some low back troubles. But anyway, we won't go there. Now down to the CELUS detail, you can also easily take a view to that item level information. So as Gala had shared, she had done her tagging at one particular level. I've done some tagging here for some Wiley journals that we pay for. And once we were to do that, right here you can see there, I've got a ranking done by the least used journals. So once we realized the minimal usage for those certain titles, several of them were cut, and that netted to a significant savings, which far exceeded the cost of CELUS. Next slide, please. So this is my comparative story. Back in my days of manufacturing, I worked for a hand tool company that made the Craftsman hand tools for when there were a bunch of Sears around still. And the reason why what CELUS was doing resonated so much for me was because when I was there, for what CELUS delivers, we had 2.5 full-time employees, 3 different software tools that I've listed there, Microsoft Database, an ETL, extract, transform, and load tool, and then a reporting tool that sat on top of it all. We had 2 to 3 servers running whatever operating systems were running on servers in the 90s, and a load of development time. So only then were we able to create what CELUS delivers. Called it a data warehouse. And now I call this data that is nearly automatically assembled, automagically, I like that word, and readied for easy querying. There is still work to be done in creating some more sophisticated reporting, but I've heard some great things that CELUS is looking at using Power BI with Seton Hall and other folks who might be ready to Power BI their data. And it sounds like some great stuff that I'm looking forward to be able to get to. So why wrangle? Because it's a great word. So other benefits we're discovering with CELUS is, as Catherine Swart points out, I've got that last bullet point there, visualize data to identify disruptions to service. So this is a real easy at a glance. This is Alexander Street Press activity. Something went awry in November. I must say we have yet to figure it out. We moved on. But as we get better using this data and keeping a closer eye on it, it's going to be great to be able to identify troubleshooting, ways to do some troubleshooting and ways to hopefully be able to, prevent future issues for access. Okay, next slide. So doing a little rewind and remind of what's behind the scenes here. Most of the data is counter compliant, and once you have your credentials loaded into CELUS, this data will again automatically be harvested monthly. The data that is not counter compliant, I'll touch on that in a bit, but this is just one nice, CELUS does a great job of visualizing, helping you visualize what's working, what's not working. And there's another graphic representation. I'm sorry, I don't have it here, but it shows you the data loads where you can easily see if a load failed on the dashboard, or other screens will show you the percentage of the data that you're looking at that has been successfully loaded. So if only 95% of the data has been loaded for a particular report you're looking at, it'll give you that number. So you can know you're close, but not the full cigar. All right, next slide there. And here's the crayon story. And why a crayon? Some of you may or may not know this. I think Gala knows this because her name, or her named the same person, Galadriel Chilton, who has authored Managing Licensed E-Resources, Techniques, Tips, and Practical Advice, opens her book with a fabulous reference to Harold and the Purple Crayon, saying, Harold goes for a moonlit walk and encounters a variety of humorous and then increasingly frustrating and perilous situations that he responds to appropriately and quickly with the help of a purple crayon. Well, what's happening here is CELUS has picked up this crayon for us and is even tackling the non-counter data. So here I have a picture of our New York Times usage, and it's actually the metric that tells me the number of individuals that have taken advantage of the subscriptions that we offer. And as you can see, there's a nice increase there. And I think it's as simple as we put out the New York Times cards, and our reference librarians started telling people, hey, you can get the New York Times. And this was a really nice way to be able to reflect the work that the library was doing in their marketing efforts. All right, next up. All right, so we're going to go from children's stories to a favorite tune from Glen Campbell. It seemed appropriate for a Austin, Texas conference. Have you been walking the streets too long, singing the same old song, trying to figure out these really tricky questions with your data? Like, are we using the embargoed period and the premium e-resource enough to justify their cost? So one of the metrics, if you zero in on that screen, is you can grab year of publication. So I can look at a particular year's activity for just the past 5 years of year of publication, that precious embargoed period. There's some nuances to that, and there's some tuning that needs to be done, but it's a really great start to get to some pretty tough questions to answer. So I say to CELUS, I say thank you. And I say to all of you, there'll be no need for compromising on the road to our horizon, because CELUS shines a light on our counter and non-counter data like a rhinestone. All right, you get the idea. Okay, next slide, last slide. Thank you, Glen Campbell and CELUS. Here's a whole bunch of resources that I have tapped, some that I've talked about, some that I haven't talked about. The counter metrics, they really have some fairly friendly videos. That second link there, you got to scroll down to get the video, so you don't have to read all that text. Consortium manager, I put them in here because we had looked at them, their Rome product, as an ERM. We're still ERM-less, but we might be getting one of the big ILSs, but they're doing a nice partnership with CELUS, and I want to learn more about it. I'm going to mention them there. The Power BI that I've got there is a Gartner survey that kind of looks at a comparative of what Power BI is doing compared to Cognos, which was that super tool I loved back at the wrench company. And then the two books there, particularly, I already mentioned the Galadriel one, and the other one has got some great acronyms so you can fix your workflows or get a workflow. And then I really just want to give a super nod to Catherine Swart, because I found that article right when I started at University of Hartford. I tracked her down. I had some great conversations with her. So a nod to Catherine, and just a nod to just this library land and the collegiality that I have found so ever present, and loved putting this together with this team here. And with that, I turn it to our next CELUS user, Kate Silton, down at Wake Forest University. Take it away, Kate.
Thank you, Gwen. I'm Kate Silton. I'm the Electronic Resources Librarian at the Z. Smith Reynolds Library at Wake Forest University in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. If I could have my next slide, please. So like my colleagues you've heard from today, our story with CELUS started from years of frustration with trying to wrangle our usage statistics using over the course of my career in various institutions. I've used lots of different methods, tried lots of different products out, and all of them were pretty disappointing. At Wake, we were having trouble getting the information we needed out of our library management system. We could not answer common questions like, what is the usage in a time period for this particular journal? So what's the point in taking the time to set up SUSHI feeds when you're going to have to log into the vendor platform anyway and manually download a report to get the answer to a question? So because of that problem, one of my big goals last year was to streamline our process for managing our usage data. And a big part of that was trying to figure out what tool might help improve that process. And very fortuitously, Ken reached out to me asking if we could chat about CELUS and whether it might be a good solution for Wake. And after a call with him and Christoph, who's the founder of CELUS, it was really clear this was the missing piece that we needed. As I've said, I tried all these other systems. I wasn't really expecting, the next one to be much better than anything else. But as it turned out, this was actually a system created to manage usage statistics. I think most other solutions are kind of shoehorned into systems that do other things. They weren't really created for that work and not built by people who really understand how that data works and how we need to use it. So based on that, and we also had a really nice trial period to start loading some of our feeds and see how it worked with our data. We decided to license CELUS in July 2024. So next slide, thank you. So how it's going. The first phase was getting all of our many providers in there. I think we have like about 75, somewhere in that neighborhood. I had built a big master list of all of our different content providers, and figured out which ones were SUSHI compliant, and then sought to get them all in CELUS. Their support did help me get some of those going, so I didn't end up doing all of them myself. And CELUS also has really great documentation on their support site, and their customer service is super helpful. So it made that process, aside from the fact that there were lots of vendors to deal with, it was very easy. And then once all of our data was in there, we could start answering some questions. That single title usage problem now is something I can answer in about 10 seconds. I'm also able to use CELUS to provide our information for iPads and other reports. Those reports are pre-made, and all I have to do is set the dates, and I have that information in seconds. That used to take me probably like a very frenzied week of work to get those items to our administration for the iPad survey, and now it's just done. And so then I got to started to think about other things we could look at in CELUS. The tagging feature, as others mentioned, is really awesome. I've used that to look at our individual journal usage. All those titles that we don't get through a package, I just put their ISSNs in and tagged them with that year, and then we can see that the usage for those all in one place. Also, with our databases, we have lots of different purchase models, lots of different packages, And I'm using tags to sort those as well. So when we do get to a point where we might need to make some difficult collection decisions, we can look just at those ones that are not tied to a big package or not owned. So that's all really clear. It's also really helpful to be able to see information like turnaways, what your top resources are, and all of that on their dashboard. The next slide. In terms of future plans, it's really fun to think about now that we have all this data at our fingertips, what other stories we could tell with that. And I will definitely look into loading our non-SUSHI data, figuring out what other workers in my library might be able to use CELUS to inform their work. Also seeing how we can get data from CELUS into Power BI to help show kind of the return on our investment. And also just figuring out what other, there's so much data, so many questions we could answer with CELUS. And that's it for me. I'll turn it over to Ken with some product updates.
Thanks. My name is Ken DiFiore. I'm manage library relations at CELUS, and I'd be remiss if I didn't express kudos to my colleagues. You know, the mission at CELUS is to help librarians improve their use of e-content usage stats and help them make better decisions at their library. And it's just wonderful to hear their stories because it really brings things full circle to us. The other thing I thought I've been remiss about is I should have had a slide to describe what the word CELUS means, where it comes from. It stands, an acronym stands for the Czech eLib usage stats, and that's where it was developed in the Czech Republic. And just as a data point, if you look at my background, that is from the Strahov library in the monastery. It is one of the prettiest libraries in the world. And as a librarian myself, I love visiting libraries. And if you're in Prague, please visit that one. It will take your breath away. And also when you're in Prague, have something called a tridelnik. It is fried dough with cinnamon and it's just delicious. Anyway, I digress. I thought I would just spend a few minutes today just telling you what has been the focus of the brilliant team of information scientists and developers that are behind CELUS and for the last few months, and that is the transition from Counter 5 or 5.02 to the latest version or release of the Counter specification, which is 5.1. This has been in the works for a while, and Tasha Mellons-Cohen, who was the executive director of Countermetrics, has published this. And as you can, I tried to show with this screenshot, is to when the expectation for publishers to be compliant. And so to be counter compliant with this, the new release 5.1, the goal was to have the publishers push out their reports in this new specification by the end of February. So the CELUS team has been working to ensure that the platform fully supports the new counter release, and we've accomplished that. So next slide. And some screenshots here, to not even try a live demonstration, but is in this particular one to show how easy it is for a user to clone their credentials into the 5.1 so that they can begin harvesting. When I say credentials, that's SUSHI credentials, I should have specified that, and to begin harvesting the counter data from the publisher who's compliant with release 5.1. So next slide. Another thing, and I thought that this was a good example to use. This screenshot is right from the Counter 5.1 documentation, and it describes a scenario which highlights the difference in how book usage is measured in the release 5 and in the release 5.1, and it really helps the librarians get more granular metrics around book usage. And so you can see that in the older version of Counter, that a particular book usage, a unique item investigation, or a total item request would be 1, but in the Counter 5.1, due to that granularity, the way that the new specification requires to count book usage, you can see that the number is 10 in this particular example. So next slide. So I thought, here's an example showing that mirrors what is in the Counter 5.1 documentation for this particular title, how you can see with CELUS that you can compare the usage that you would get for a particular book in the release 5 specification and how it changes in the release 5.1 specification. In this example, it's 1, and then the count is up to 15. So with CELUS, you can look at legacy data and compare it to the data with the new specification. Next slide. So there's some other things that you can do in comparing your usage data as it's reported with the Counter 5 spec and then with the new 5.1. And you can, in this, I'm trying to represent here the continuity and how over a period of time, and how that's in a single graph, you can look at the usage in the older spec and how it's transitioned to the new release 5.1 all in one chart. Next slide. So that's all that I wanted to talk about with what we've been working on at CELUS and how that focus has been on the transition from release 5 to release 5.1. So I guess, Juliana, I turn it over to you, and then we open it up for questions on the online forum. Is that?
Sure. If you're in FeedLoop right now, we have some polling questions you could answer. And of course, we'll revisit this team, the questions that come in over the next couple of days, but we're happy to open it up from questions from our moderators.
Great. Thank you all so much for that presentation. We do have a couple of questions that have come in. The first is from Haley Battaglia from Southern Connecticut State. Is there harvesting available for non-counter data, or does that usage need to be manually uploaded into CELUS?
I can take that one. Haley, if the publisher is not counter compliant, then it has the data has to be manually uploaded into indirectly into CELUS. The point of using SUSHI is to facilitate the acquisition of the counter reports from the publisher into the library's harvester, in this case, the CELUS harvester. So there is no automatic harvesting of non-counter data because they don't have a SUSHI server with they're delivering that counter data. So it has to be loaded manually.
And if I could just jump in, CELUS as an organization has been really good if they have a non-counter vendor that they do not have within the platform, we as users can request it. We give them a kind of a look at the output, and then they will add non-counter vendors periodically with their updates. So it's been, they've been very responsive as a vendor to help with some of these non-counter compliant vendors that we're trying to track data for.
Thanks, Juliana. And I'd be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to my colleague, Simona, who is on the front lines helping librarians with their non-counter vendors. She is just an expert in counter data and will work with those publishers and to help get their data in a way that can be loaded into CELUS. So thank you, Simona, for all your hard work.
Yeah, I hope she's listening. Definitely pass that back to her, because we went back and forth with some Canopy data, the streaming video platform, and just kind of trying to figure out something with seconds versus minutes. And she was great. We had a great exchange, and we were able to figure that thing out and make it make some sense. And I just want to speak also to the non-counter data I had referred to in my presentation. We've got the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal. So even though it's non-counter data, we're able to work with CELUS, and the way CELUS is set up, you can look at some of the non-counter data and do some comparisons. And that's still some more opportunities to look at, but it's a great tool because it's not like a million spreadsheets. It's all in one place with nice colors and graphs.
Thank you so much. And I will just mention there are quite a few questions coming in, so we'll get through as many as we can, but would like to just invite our presenters to go into Feed Loop later on and just take a look at any of the questions we don't get to. Tara Kalaman from Boston College said, I'd be interested in hearing if any members of the panel use the cost per use capability.
I don't think that's there yet.
Okay.
Ken?
Yeah, well, there is a cost per use mechanism that's in the platform. I think that I characterize it as a great starting point, and the reason is because it works at the platform level. So for a platform that you are paying a particular fee to, you can enter in your cost per use, annual cost per use or fiscal year cost per use. There's flexibility there of the time period, but you can put that in, and at a platform level, you can get a cost per use. Now, and that's where I say starting point, because oftentimes librarians would want to have a cost per use at a particular journal title. And part of the challenge that we have at CELUS in that regard is libraries often have different ways of measuring their own cost. In fact, I just attended a session here live in Austin about how at least two libraries manage their cost for titles. And so it does vary, and that, again, that makes it difficult for us. But at a platform level, like say JSTOR, for example, that you pay one price and say get access to the entire collections that they have, you can put that fee in and then get a cost per use based on just that platform. But anything at the more granular level, the title level, you'd have to export the usage into another spreadsheet, say, or another application to join it with your cost per use. Now, we are looking at extending our capabilities in our next release, but that's all in the future, and I'd rather not talk about that at this point.
Thank you. This question comes from Kirsten Cather from Grand Canyon U. Can CELUS harvest counter 5 data that doesn't have SUSHI set up? We have a number of vendors who may be counter 5 compliant, but are not offering SUSHI polls.
I'll let someone else talk, because I think you're doing that, right, Gwen? Are you doing some of that?
Yeah, we're doing that a lot. I don't know if we can do a quick screen share, but absolutely. I mean, we were just talking Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Canopy. There's a whole page, Juliana, maybe you know, about 20 at least in there that are non-SUSHI or non-counter even.
Right. So this is, I think she's specifically asking about the vendor provides counter compliant data, but does not have a SUSHI pool. And so there are a few vendors that we have like that, but you have to manually ingest them periodically. So we have a couple we've ingested at OSU.
And I would add, I had one vendor that I set up, and they had
of a screen flow that helps guide the user through that.
I had one vendor that I set up. They had counter credentials, but they did not publicly within their admin platform reveal that they offered SUSHI. And I just emailed them directly and asked them, do you have SUSHI? And they said, sure enough, we do. And here's the credentials. So, yeah.
That's a good point, Gala, because I've had to go back and forth. And sometimes people at these places don't realize that their vendor might have signed up with a third party stats gatherer, LibLinks and some of the other guys.
I know Kate's trying to chime in, so.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I was going to say, if you have like a feed that's not working temporarily or something and you need the data, you can always, even if it is one that has SUSHI, you can manually upload a report if you need to. You can always do that for any of your vendors. So that's really easy to do, and it just gets ingested in there with all your data.
Yeah, at OSU, we've got a list compiled of our non-SUSHI vendors, and we're just scheduling those, every seasonally, or trying to figure out a good schedule for those to make sure that they're uploaded.
Thank you all. This next question is from Julia Reese from the University of Pittsburgh. Do you have any training resources you recommend for getting started with CELUS?
This is such an incredibly intuitive tool, honestly. CELUS has some great documentation as well. It's easy to get through and figure out, but I have jumped right in with both feet and read zero documentation first, and it is just that intuitive.
Yeah, I have to give a shout out to Juliana and Gala and Rebecca at OSU. I recall when I first got the email about your interest, and I set up the trial site, and I looked in a few days later, and there were 95 SUSHI credentials already loaded, and you had millions and millions of usage metrics loaded. And I was really impressed. That is one of the fastest implementations that I've witnessed. So, but kudos to you all. But I'd like to say we think it's intuitive, but seeing it in practice like that with the folks at Oklahoma State was very impressive.
Yeah, well, Oklahoma State is very impressive. That team just putting together this program with you guys. Seriously, you really have to have your house in order to get to the point that you got to so quickly. And in talking to them, I understand that was something that they had done. And that's a big deal, just having all those credentials accessible and knowing who's where and what. So go Oklahoma State.
I will say the biggest challenge with CELUS and the documentation is the non-counter compliant data, because every vendor is different. And CELUS has built out, for the most part, directions on how to properly format that data, or if you run into errors, how to troubleshoot that data. I think about Canopy, for example, as a vendor, everything needs to be structured in a very certain way. You have to have like tabs for different years and your data downloaded, and the documentation on the CELUS website walks you through everything. And then their support, if I do run into problems, I could just ping their support folks and they respond really quickly to examine the data and where we may have gotten wrong or gotten off track. So from a client vendor standpoint, very responsive, very willing to work with their clients in this process.
Thank you. So there are a couple questions from two different attendees, but they sort of talk about similar things. It's coming from Elizabeth Friedrich from Bowling Green State and Denise Dolan from HACC. And the questions are wondering if CELUS identifies title overlap analysis across databases, / how does CELUS handle duplicate titles on multiple platforms? And can it identify when the same title is available and return data on overall usage as well as usage on the individual platforms? That was a long question, so hopefully you guys got that.
I could answer this one. So it does handle overlap. It doesn't handle it perfectly. If the title is in the report has the same actual title, same ISSN, like all the metadata is the same, it will show you a comparison across platforms. Sometimes if there's some discrepancy in how the title is written, it isn't, you'd like have to do an ISSN search to see multiple instances of it. I would say that's like the exception and not the rule. Most of the time you'll be able to see all of the usage for your title across all platforms that you have it on.
I'll throw one peculiar behavior I have noticed, and this isn't anything to do with CELUS. It's depends on what your ILS is. We are Folio with EBSCO Discovery Systems, and what I have noticed is with loading of the EBSCO data, that it is loading data based on activity from our discovery layer. So you get some non-matches, shall we say, because the primary identifiers aren't the same as the resource on EBSCO host platform. That's the only like hardcore discrepancy I've run into, but it has resulted in me having to do some serious cleanup after I've done title list uploads, because the matching, you can't, CELUS isn't able to differentiate by platform if you can't identify a reliable primary identifier to include with your title upload. Does that make sense? It's complex.
Yes.
I think it does. And I wonder if that, like, we were trying to figure out McGraw-Hill the other day, and we buy 2 different platforms or 3 different platforms from them. But in CELUS, we don't see that platform delineation. We just see a listing of all the books. Is that the same type of thing you're talking about?
No, not at all. Not at all. But I've got some thoughts, and we can talk separately sometime.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks.
Okay, I think we have time for one last question. Hopefully it's not as complex. This is from Tom Lemkohler from Missouri State. Are the dashboards shareable? And is there a way to export reports from this to PDF, Excel, or other formats? I see a lot of head nodding.
Or heads nodding actively. Yes, you can export with or without the visualizations. It's really easy to get your data out and play with it in other ways.
Right.
And the export to Excel is super friendly. The first page tells you everything that you filtered on. So if you forget, it's there. And then the second tab in your Excel spreadsheet will dump your data on there. So Ken, you want to speak to some of the other features that I haven't
No,
noticed?
you all nailed it.
Yeah, the graphs aren't interactive when you download them, but they are shareable and they're easy to download. And you do have that data that you can also now upload to Power BI. And Power BI does have you, you have to have an account to share some of those graphs. So there's that caveat.
Wonderful. Well, that puts us right at time at 1:10 p.m. Thank you so much to all of our presenters. And again, there are lots of questions online, so if you all get a chance to hop into FeedLoop and look at some of those, this has really gotten people interested and thinking a lot about your presentation. So thank you all so much. And thank you to our online attendees, our online moderator, and hope you all enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thank you. Bye-bye.